السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. Continuing from the talk given 2 nights ago, we were speaking about the concept of insha, which means generating, and it was in relation to the generation or creation of the human being during gestation. ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر. Then we generated it as another creation. In that verse, it was describing the stages of the evolution of the fetus from the embryo to the human being, to the person. During these 5 or 6 stages, there's one constant. And that's why the identity is always one. That constant was the soul, which is the source of generation, the source of animation, that which leads to all these functions and manifestations of the embryo to the person. Even right now, it's the soul which is speaking, doing things, thinking of things. The soul is the primary agent. Otherwise matter, core matter, doesn't do anything. All our body, all our faculties are generations of the soul, products of the soul. The soul is generating all this. So the constant is the soul, or nafs. That nafs is constant from fertilization to right now, until we die, even after death. The nafs is always a constant. But that soul, before 4 months, was vegetative and material, which meant it depends on matter, existence-wise. And before 4 months, there was no me. There was no me, there was no I, but there was a soul. That's why I'm saying the soul was a constant. The I wasn't a constant. The I started at around 4 months in gestation until the end. We are eternal beings. We will always be. But the I had a start. It was around 4 months. Before that, there was a soul, but that soul wasn't immaterial. It was a material soul, meaning it depends on matter, existence-wise. After 4 months, then it's an immaterial soul, which means it doesn't depend on matter, existence-wise. Even if you get rid of the matter, this will persist in the hereafter, existence-wise. It will always be. Whereas before 4 months, no, there would be no I arising if the fetus was aborted before 4 months. Okay, we discussed that before. Now, then we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala وَأَنْشَأْنَاهُمْ خَلْقًا آخَرَ. Then we generated another creature. Here Allah is the generator, the munshi or the muntashi. He is the generator. The ultimate generator of the offspring is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The question is, through the worldly causes and the worldly things, what is manifesting that generating capacity of Allah? What is reflecting that generating attribute that Allah has? If we find the answer to that question, we will find who the parents are. because the whole verse is about the offspring. Offspring have parents. Who are the parents? Look for the generator. Whoever's the generator is the parent. Was Allama Hassan Zada Omri said, the nafikh, the breather of the spirit, is Allah, the mother and the father. But Allah being the cause of causes, these being vertical to Allah. So Allah is breathing the spirit through the worldly causes, namely the mother and the father. So it's as if the mother and the father also are nafikh, and they are breathing the spirit. And then we read a passage from Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh. I won't go through it again. Then we came to this verse. Alam yakun nutfatan min maniyyin yumna. Was not one a drop of sperm that was transmitted? The key word here is transmitted. Who is doing the transmitting? Whoever's doing the transmission, imna, and imna, transmission means it's in relation to the transition of the sperm from one place to another place. Who is the transmitter? Who is transmitting sperm from one place to another? Now, the answer to this question is both the male, the mother and the father. How? The father, it's very straightforward. That during the act, he's transmitting sperm from one place into the female. But once the sperm gets in and the act is over, that sperm is still moving. And it's moving towards the egg. Who is responsible for the transmission of the sperm's movement to the egg? Now remember the famous, well, not famous, but well-known spermatologist he was in that conference I was speaking about. He said we were always looking for the strong spermatozoa, so that for IVF and ICSI we know which ones to choose. But now it seems that we have to study the egg, because the egg is sending signals for that one spermatozoan to get to it. The egg is sending signals. And once that sperm gets into the egg, by means of a number of other signals, it blocks off any other sperm getting in. But the point is we have to study the egg better. So here, the mother is also a momni, one who is transmitting the sperm. The male is also a momni, a transmitter of the sperm, but that's through copulation, actively. In the act, he's transmitting, he's generating, he's doing insha actively through the act. But once the sperm is in, for it to go to the egg, that is also a transition from one place to another. Who is the transmitter? It's the female. The woman is transmitting the sperm. And so she is also a transmitter. Her soul is responsible for the transmission of the sperm from a certain point onwards. Okay. So, in IVF or in ICSI, another problem that arises, in addition to the problem we mentioned before, which I don't want to repeat that again, a second problem is this, that according to the logic of the Quran, and I'll read the verse in a minute, the male procreator, the walid, that male component responsible for procreation and generation of the offspring, which is the definition of procreation, the male component is regarded as a harith, one who inseminates or puts the seeds, sows the seeds. The female component of procreation is the muhtarath, the tillage, the cultivating land in which the seed is sown. And that is the walida. So the male component is sowing the seeds. The female component is acting as a medium to grow the seed. Now, the issue is this, that in IVF, let's say the male gives a sperm sample only, and the procreation doesn't result as a result of copulation, and he just gives a sample. There's no copulation involved in procreation. He gives a sample for IVF to arise. There, the harith identity of the male is compromised. The sowing identity, because he's not inseminating anyone anymore. He gave a sample, he didn't inseminate, he didn't sow the seed in any place. He just gave a sample. The doctor then put the sample in a test tube, fusion arose, fertilization occurred, then they injected the embryo in a woman, either one's wife or in surrogacy in another woman. But the harith, the sowing identity of the man is compromised. Also, with the woman, she's the muhtarath, she's the tillage, the land in which the seeds are sown. She's a cultivator. Now, in natural fertilization, yes, after being inseminated actively by the man, then she grows and generates that embryo and acts as a tillage. Okay. But the point is that if, like in IVF, she only gives her egg, or they take her eggs from her, rather. They take her eggs from her, so that when they take the sperm sample too, they put it in a test tube. They take her eggs too, take the sperm, put it in a test tube for IVF. Here, if they do that, once the embryo results, up to this point, she is still not a tillage. Now, if they put the embryo in her, the same person, the owner of the egg, then she acts as a tillage, that's okay. But if they put that embryo in another woman's womb, and that's the whole idea of surrogacy, then that surrogate mother is a muhtarath, is a tillage, is a cultivating ground for the seed. But the first woman has lost that identity of being a tillage and cultivating land. So that's important. When we come to the question of who is the mother, is the mother merely the owner of the egg, or is the mother the owner of the womb? And here it would seem, from the logic of the Quran, since the mother is a tillage, it would seem that the logic of the Quran would go in this direction, to say the mother is the owner of the womb. Now here there's a great controversy, differences amongst the marajih. And as I said 2 nights ago, everyone goes to their own marja, and you ask them, and the criteria are given, who is the father, who is the mother. But this is a growing opinion, especially amongst the fuqaha, who are also arif, like Ayatollah Jawadi Amali. He regards, and many others too, like the late Ayatollah Khouy, rahmatullah alayhi, and many others, today and in the past. But it's growing more and more. They regard the mother as the owner of the womb, because she's muhtarath, she's a cultivator. The seed is cultivated through her medium. But if she just gives an egg, and that's it, and then they give it to a surrogate mother, she's just given an egg. She's like a man in this regard. She's also a harith. The man gave the sperm sample, the woman gave the egg. They're both sowers. Whereas she has to be a cultivator, that farmyard, that tillage. So with the man, who is the father? Who is the generator? We said that is actively generating is the father who is emitting the sperm during copulation. Because during the act, he's actively generating. If he just gives a sample for a test tube, that active generation is not there anymore. I'll just give one small example. You know when breastfeeding mothers, when they, for example, there's a man and a woman, and they have children, then the woman also breastfeeds another child, which is not her own. After a number of sessions that the Sharia has delineated, that the mother is breastfeeding the child, I think it's 14 or 15 sessions, then that child becomes mahram to the mother, a ridai, son or daughter, to that breastfeeding mother. They weren't related before. After breastfeeding a number of times, it has to reach that certain threshold which the Sharia has delineated. After that, breastfeeding, which is a form of generating. The woman is generating something here when she's breastfeeding. By means of this generating via breastfeeding, after a number of times, the child is now mahram. Not a genetic child like the other genetic mother and father who procreated. But since there's an element of generation involved, they become mahram. But the mother directly breastfeeds from her chest. Then they ask the fuqaha, let's say a woman breastfeeds, but she empties her chest into the milk, into a glass or a cup, and then feeds the child with a cup. Let's say that 14 or 15 times, which is necessary. Does that child become mahram to the mother? All the fuqaha, as far as I know, from past and today, they say no. The child doesn't become mahram. Now, that's fiqh, but what is the reasoning? What's the rationale? Because the mother is not actively generating anymore. You're giving milk from a cup. There has to be, in insha, in the process of insha, generation, it has to be active, mubasharatan, not passive. But when the woman is giving it directly, it's generating, it's building. But when it's giving indirectly, no, that doesn't count. So here the same applies. With the male, when it's copulation directly, he's generating. If he just gives a sample, then they inject the sample, it's different. Not most of the fuqaha say the owner of the sperm, irrespective, is the father. But some say no, and I'm going to read Ayatollah Sistani's fatwa in a minute. So that's another point to bear in mind. In Minhaj al-Salihin, which in Ayatollah Sistani's Minhaj al-Salihin, I want to read the fatwa. He says, I'll read it sentence by sentence, and it's only my own translation, but the main points are conveyed, but it may be, no, it's not 100% maybe accurate. يلحق ولد المرأة في العقد الدائم والمنقطع بشروط. The offspring of the mother, be it in a permanent marriage or a temporary marriage, the offspring of the woman is appended, and appended means is joined to, is connected to the husband with a number of prerequisites. So this means that that husband, that man, will be the father if these prerequisites are abided by. So the woman has an offspring, that man will be the father if these prerequisites are abided by. دخوله بها مع العلم بالإنزال أو احتماله أو الإنزال على ظاهر الفرج. The prerequisite is the man's copulating the woman, knowing that emission occurred, seminal emission occurred during the act, or he deems it probable that the seminal emission arose. Or when seminal emission arose, the sperm that was emitted, the copulation didn't result wholly, directly, and the sperm fell on the outside of the female genitalia and then went in. Either way, but it was during an act. وَأَمَّا مَعَ انْتِفَاءِ الْأَمْرَيْنِ. But if neither of these two were to happen, i.e. there was no emission or no copulation, knowing that there's emission there or deeming it probable, or there was no emission on the outside of the female genitalia. If none of these two arose, وَدُخُولُ مَائِهِ فِي فَرْجِهَا بِطَرِيقَةٍ أُخْرَى كالأنبوبة ونحوها واحتمال كون حملها من مائه ففي إلحاق الولد به إشكال. He says that if none of these arose, but the sperm entered the female genitalia by means of another way, not copulation, not by that act which let the sperm enter in the female genitalia gradually, but it entered the female genitalia in another way, such as injections, like in test tube babies. Unbuba is a test tube. That test tube is unbuba in Arabic. That's another way which leads to fertilization in IVF, for example. وَنَحْوَهَا, and other ways that the sperm leads to fertilization or enters to lead to fertilization eventually, and it does lead to that pregnancy. Appending the man or appending the offspring to the man is problematic, i.e. ihtiyat wajib is not the father. That's Ayatollah Sistani in Minhaj al-Salihin, and many others may have that. So what does this mean for those who follow Ayatollah Sistani? Well, first it's an ihtiyat wajib. They can refer to someone else if they want to, but if they want to stick with Ayatollah Sistani, then that man won't be the father. He just gave a sperm sample through IVF. He won't be classified as the father. And that has its own repercussions now. One is in the question of mahramiyya, if that offspring is going to be female, it's not going to be mahram anymore. Another question is the question of inheritance. Will they inherit or not? Since it's not a clear fatwa, it's an ihtiyat, then you have to do reconciliation here in their inheritance. And there are other complications may arise, but fiqh has solutions to all these complications. Now I didn't want to get into the fiqh part of it, but the point is the male here has to be one who procreates actively through copulation, rather than just giving a sample, because there's no active procreation involved when you just give a sample. Okay. There's a verse in the Holy Quran that reads, قالت أَنَّا يَكُونُ لِي غُلَامٌ. How can I be with son? This is in relation to Lady Maryam alayhi salam. When Jibreel said to her that you're going to have a son, she said, how can I be with a son? وَلَمْ يَمْسَسْنِي بَشَرٌ وَلَمْ أَكُ بَغِيًّا. How can I be with a son when I've never been touched? Never been touched means no one's ever, there's never been copulation. Otherwise she may have been touched, physically. But there was never ever any copulation. She never married. She was chaste. Copulation never resulted. And then she said, I'm not one of the wrongdoers. Now with Lady Maryam, who is the mother? We say Lady Maryam. Who is the father? We say there is no father. Why is there no father? There was no copulation. But if you were to say the owner, sperm alone will suffice, be it with or without copulation, a question arises. That Nabi Isa alayhi salam, who we say doesn't have a father, if you were to do it, take a cell of his and do a test and test his nucleus to see how many chromosomes he has, how many would he have? Nabi Isa, Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, be rest assured he'll have 46 chromosomes like me and you. He's Bashar like me and you. He has 46 chromosomes. Lady Maryam has 23 chromosomes. Because a female sex cell, the egg, has 23 chromosomes. The male sex cell, the sperm, has 23 chromosomes. All the other cells, we call it somatic cells. And they have 46 chromosomes, because they're a product of that fusion of the two sex cells. So, Nabi Isa has 46 chromosomes. He doesn't have a father. But those other 23 chromosomes, how did it arise? You can't just cancel the sperm element here. Now, how did a sperm enter the body? It doesn't need to enter the body. There may be other ways that those 23 chromosomes can be brought around. For example, Lady Maryam's stem cells could lead to sperm cells, because stem cells can lead to any form of cell in the body. Her stem cells may have been converted to a sperm cell, and then that sperm cell fused with her egg. Now, if her sperm cell, even if her sperm cell that arose from her stem cell is female, it can be converted to male. Even today, everyone says that's theoretically possible. So that you can't just cancel out the sperm element here. But everyone says Nabi Isa had no father. وَلَمْ يَمْسَسْنِي, I was never touched. Never touched, never copulated. And so, remember a few days ago in the discussion of evolution, Adam and Eve, they had neither father nor mother. This is something which is explicit in the Quran in relation to Adam, in relation to Eve, no, but we have it in the traditions. We have a lot of traditions. And that's why, in the theory of evolution, which says that man was given birth to by apes or by Neanderthals or whatever, this is problematic. Because if Adam and Eve, if the first man and woman, evolved through the birth of apes or Neanderthals, then they would have a father, a sperm element, copulation. Apes do it, Neanderthals do it, or did it. And they would have a mother, a womb gave rise to them, a female womb, be it of the ape or the Neanderthal. And that's the strongest reasoning we have so far, that we don't accept evolution. But if evolution is proven beyond doubt, 100% in the future, yes, we can still interpret it in another way. Okay. Now I wanted to discuss about the female too, but with your permission, I wanted to go through a few verses in relation to who the mother is. I'll give that a miss, and I want to close this discussion, and from tomorrow I want to start a new set of discussions. We'll start with what is dua, especially with the nights of Qadr coming. Let's dissect this concept of dua, inshallah, from tomorrow. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi.